Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guests are Darcy Weir, David Ellis, and Shane Corson. Before I bring them on, I have to thank My Patriot Supply. They are, of course, the experts in emergency preparedness. With the possibility of more lockdowns in the near future, it couldn't hurt to have an emergency food supply. Thanks to My Patriot Supply, I have a 4-week supply of their awesome food. It stays good in storage for 25 years. Right now, you get $70 off a 2-week supply and $100 off a 4-week supply of their food. Just click the link in the description or visit preparewithfkn.com to get your supply today. Please always subscribe to our backup channel in case YouTube decides to just pull the plug on us one day. That's lbry.com. That link is in the description as well. And we're always available on all your favorite podcast platforms. And finally, huge thanks to everyone that's made donations. You guys are amazing, and it's because of you that we can keep going, keep bringing you these amazing guests and information. Tonight, I want to welcome first Darcy Weir. He is a young filmmaker who recently completed a new documentary based on the theory that relic hominids like Sasquatch live in deep wilderness all around the world. He has also been making a series of documentaries that focus on UFOs, secret space, underground bases like Area 51, and Phil Schneider's Dulce, New Mexico testimonials, and Bigfoot. David Ellis has followed the Bigfoot phenomenon since 1963. He took his interest into the field in 2006 and joined the Olympic Project with Derek Randles in 2010. Since then, he has learned to track Bigfoot and record and edit field recordings. He has reviewed thousands of hours of audio using bioacoustics methods of analysis and has collected hundreds of suspicious audio vocalization clips. And Shane is a native of Scotland and has had an interest in cryptids since his youth. He has been actively investigating since 1997, and in 2008, fate brought him to Oregon, where he dove headfirst into the subject of Bigfoot. In 2011, his 2011 sighting in the Mount Hood National Forest served to deepen the passion of his pursuit. He has done extensive Bigfoot-related research in California, Oregon, and Washington, and spends a tremendous amount of time in the field camping, hiking, and exploring. He is a proud core member of the Olympic Project and a co-host for the Monster X Radio podcast. Gentlemen, welcome. How are y'all doing tonight?
Good. Thank you for having us. This is Darcy speaking.
Well, hey, thank you guys so much. Yeah, I appreciate y'all joining us. The Bigfoot and cryptid phenomenon has always fascinated me. The question of, is it just an ancient hominid that has survived, mostly undetected for possibly thousands of years? Is it something more metaphysical or paranormal or even extraterrestrial? I've heard all the many different theories about what these beings could be, and I'm really interested in to get your take on what this is. First, I'd like to get started with just a brief background from each of you about what got you interested in the Bigfoot phenomenon to begin with. Let's start with Darcy.
Sure thing. Okay, so for myself, I studied film and sociology in university, and I've always been making film projects to some degree throughout my life. And in 2015, I was invited by a friend to go to a area of of British Columbia that's known to harbor lots and lots of Sasquatch sightings and reports throughout history. The area is called the Harrison Hot Springs. It's actually a bit of a vacationer area. As you enter this small town, you see a large carving of a Sasquatch and, welcome to Harrison Hot Springs. So you kind of have an idea of what you're getting yourself into as you approach. And I've always been interested in UFOs. The question, are we being visited? Is it being kept from us? That type of theory. But this, I thought, was a bit of a stretch. I actually didn't quite believe in this phenomenon when I first came about it. And I was offered to go speak to these Sasquatch or Bigfoot hunters, as you would call them in the United States, Bill Miller and Thomas Steenberg. These two gentlemen lived in the area. Bill Miller is now passed. Thomas Steenberg is still around. Eventually, through meeting those guys in 2015, I interviewed also kind of a pioneer in researching and publishing information on this subject, a man by the name of John Green. He, went out and investigated the first prints and such that showed up just before the Patterson-Gimlin film was shot, and he reported on some incredible events that happened in Canadian history, even a really incredible event that multiple witnesses accounted for in 1952, which was the Chapman Farm Ruby Creek incident. Anyways, I met these men. I sat down with them. I investigated. I asked them lots of questions about why they believed in Sasquatch and what were some of the most credible events in history. And they laid out very logical and interesting responses to my questions, which, led me down the proverbial rabbit hole, so to speak. And that is what got me started in this whole investigation, this whole subject. I made a documentary called The Unwanted Sasquatch back in 2016. It's been re-released now in 2020 as a director's cut. And then you can see Sasquatch Among Wild Men, which is kind of like a evolution, so to speak, of my first documentary. And I interviewed David Ellis, Shane Corson, Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. I really got to know them even more and how deep the subject goes internationally.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Let's go to David. What got you started with this Bigfoot phenomenon?
Well, let's start with I'm born and raised in the state of Washington in the United States, which is kind of a well-known hotspot, if you will, for Bigfoot. So I was raised in Vancouver, Washington. My grandparents, one of my set of grandparents had a 80-acre farm near Battleground, Washington, which is just north of Vancouver, near the Columbia River. And my grandfather was cutting hay one day, and he said that up popped a 5-foot-tall monkey, and it ran across the field and hopped the fence and into the woods. So, you got your typical questions, Grandpa, where did the monkey come from? Well, I guess it escaped from a circus. Well, what circus? So I'm 5 or 6 years old when I first hear this story. And so from that point, I've got this in the back of my mind that there's monkeys in the woods. So periodically, my grandmother would, when I was staying over there, would send me down maybe a half a mile long road to the mailbox, and I'd have to go past those woods. So it was a long walk both ways. Fast forward to when I'm 11 years old, we lived about 5 miles south of where my grandfather's farm was. And I had a personal incident. There was a cow pasture that we called the stump field because at one point in time it was a forest and it had been logged, but it was logged using the old spring and buckboard method. So that left 12 to 15 tall foot edifices in this cow pasture. Hence we called it the stump field. But it was great for kids. We go there and we play for hours and hours. Well, one afternoon about mid-September, there was a group of us we were moving from one end of the field to the other. And we came within about 30 feet of the fence line, which was densely forested on the other side. It was just really brushy, and it had alders and firs and typical forested situation, nestled right up against the fence. But there was overhanging limbs, and one of the people in the group grabbed a stick and hit one of the limbs, and all heck broke loose. Alder trees on the other side of the fence began swaying and really shaking vigorously. And I was in awe because there was no wind, and there's no way that these trees could be shaking the way that they were. And then about 2-inch diameter limbs were being ripped off of the tree, alder tree. And it was about 12 to 15 feet in the air that these limbs were being ripped off. And then it cut loose with a scream, about a 12-second scream that I later described to my parents as a cross between a lion roaring and an elephant trumpeting. I was very adamant that it was two sounds in one. It had a low component and a high component. But the next thing I know, I'm kind of coming to out of a fog. It was so loud that it knocked us to the ground. And the next thing I can remember is yelling, "Run!" And of course, we all ran back home. But really didn't tie it to Bigfoot. It was just this crazy sound that I had heard. And then the following week, we had a library class in our school library, and the teacher would have us tell stories about what happened to us over the weekend, and hopefully she would be able to ferret out what was interesting to us so that she could kind of steer us toward books to read. Well, up shot my hand like a rocket, and I related the story that I just told you. And she thanked me for telling a wild story. And then about 30 minutes later, while everybody's reading a book and I'm reading one too, I get a little tap on my shoulder, and it's the librarian. And she said, "Come with me for a minute." And so I walk with her, and we get to a room where nobody else can hear. It's just her and me. And she starts grilling me about what I had heard. And, was it a cow? Was it a cougar? Do you think it could have been this or that? And I said, no, I know what an elephant sounds like. I know what a lion roar sounds like. I've been to the Portland Zoo. I know what those animals sound like. And that's what that's what that scream was. Well, okay, she says, I think I have a book for you if you're interested. She said, it's an adult book. It was published about 2 years ago. It was Ivan T. Sanderson's Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life. And when she got that book for me to read, it kind of became clear why. So that really set it in my mind that maybe there's more to my grandpa's monkey in the woods. So
yeah, that's very interesting. And Shane, what about you? What brought you into this?
Well, yeah. So I grew up in Scotland. I was born and raised in Scotland on a little island called Islay off the west coast of Scotland in the Hebrides. And basically, I was interested in fossils at that point in time. Growing up, I was interested in fossils. We'd find them on the island. And I was really heavily interested in paleontology in general. And so my mom would get me books on paleontology, but then she started introducing me into other books of unknown animals and cryptids. And so I started reading every book I can get my hands on, whether it was something about the abominable snowman or Nessie, which is, in basically from my neck of the woods. And I got into reading books on Sasquatch and Bigfoot and looking at North America. I have family in North America. So I was really interested in the Sasquatch phenomena. Though growing up, I was also interested in, like, say, water cryptids in general, including Nessie. Fortunately, I had a chance to move over to the States, San Diego, of all places, in '93, and still had that interest in fossils, paleontology, and cryptids, especially Sasquatch. Once I moved to the States, I thought, man, I'm in the right place to do some stuff. And it wasn't until about 97 that I really started getting out, when I got some wheels and started driving around and getting out and investigating older reports, driving around areas. I used to investigate areas down San Diego, like Cuyamaca, Alpine area with the Zubies, Lake Henshaw, and the San Bernardino Mountains. And as the years progressed, I started going up to Yosemite and investigating up there and camping and hiking, exploring. And I did that for many years. I never found anything of real interest in all my years. I talked to a lot of interesting witnesses and had a great time there exploring, getting to know the environment, getting to hone in on my camping skills and my hiking skills and what have you. And in 2008, I moved up to Oregon with my wife. She's from Oregon. So I thought, wow, this is like a dream come true for me. Kind of leaving everything behind in California and moving up north, and had a wonderful time up in Oregon, exploring and hiking and just amazing camping. Truly, what an amazing state. And did a little bit of research and different things. And but once again, maybe came across one interesting impression in many years. And so I had a couple of buddies that I worked with that were into backpacking. Well, at least one of them was. The other guy was kind of, he's from Boston. He really wasn't into backpacking, but wanted to try it out. And we really all had one thing in common. We loved to fish. So we picked out the spot in Mount Hood and went out remote backpacking and camping. And we had this experience, this two-night experience, which solidified the existence of Sasquatch for me. And for a while after that experience, I thought, well, shoot, we weren't doing I wasn't out there actively researching. I was camping and hiking and fishing, being an obnoxious camper, so to speak. And so I thought for sure that I could prove the existence at that time, being naive, that I could prove it because I knew where they were at. I had this experience. I knew that Sasquatch was real. And I spent, took me a good 2 months or two to get back out there because it was quite a harrowing experience. But I eventually came to the conclusion that this is not a one-man show. I need equipment, a lot more equipment than I had then. I need, being a transplant to this area. I still, I lived up there since 2008 and this occurred in 2011. I still wasn't an Oregonian. I was a transplant to the Pacific Northwest. And I just came to the conclusion that I needed help. And that's when I started reaching out and getting involved with people like Derek Randalls and Cliff Barrickman. And eventually that led me to become a part of the Olympic Project, which I am definitely a proud member of. And I am very proud to work with the likes of David Ellis and Derek Randalls and many, many other talented individuals. So that's what really launched me. That encounter really launched me into this research, knowing that that something is out there. There is a Sasquatch. It's not so much a phenomenon for me. There's a living entity with, more than one, obviously, in these woods of North America. And as in the Darcy Weir's documentary, Sasquatch Among Wildmen, some tantalizing, interesting correlations from across the world that a lot of people wouldn't really necessarily think about. That's why I think this documentary is really interesting. So, but, that's what basically got me involved in this field.
Very cool. Now, you had mentioned briefly that you had a personal experience or encounter. We did hear a little bit about David's encounter. I'd like to hear from each of you if you've had any of these profound personal encounters. Shane, since you were just mentioning yours, could you tell us a little bit more about what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say over the years, with both individually and with other Olympic Project members and other associates that I work with, had a lot of interesting things happen over the years, a lot of cool finds, a lot of interesting encounters. The only sighting to date that I've had, eye to eye, so to speak, and I've had some stuff, I've seen some stuff through FLIR, through thermal imagery, that is very interesting and quite likely Sasquatch in my opinion. But back in 2011, August of 2011, I was on this backpacking trip. I was with two other guys. One of them was kind of new to camping. The other was an Oregonian, so he's very familiar with camping. We weren't familiar with this area, but we decided to go and hike some of these and camp in some of these remote areas and hike to some of these remote lakes. We actually got lost. We made our camp at this particular lake and decided to go hike out and visit one of the other 6 lakes in this area. We got lost. That day we hiked about 17 miles. We crossed a lot of ridge lines. One of the pals that I was with, he was definitely afraid of bears. He literally brought a pot and pan with him and would bang him around. To scare off the bears, we told him that was very annoying, knock it off. We're all armed. We're very familiar with bears, been around them. I've been around a lot of bears in Yosemite. They're kind of a nuisance down there. Been around a lot of bears. And so we told him knock it off. But the reason I mentioned the pot and pan thing and just us being up in that area and getting lost was I think we stirred something up on this ridge line. One of my kind of coined things is I like to call Sasquatch, or as I refer to as a ridge ape. The reason being is I think Sasquatch really resides on a lot of ridges. It's the high ground. I always preach it's the high ground. It's super important in my opinion. Now, we got lost. We hiked 17 miles. We eventually made it to the lake we were going to fish, but by then it was getting dark. We had a couple mile hike back to our camp, which we did. We get back to our camp and we make a fire. We cook food. We stay up till about 11:30 and we go to bed. And that night I hear what sounds like around the 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning hour, what sounds like rock clanking, just that, and it's getting closer and closer. And one of my buddies that was to the left of me, we were sleeping in 3 separate tents next to this lake, says to me, hey, do you awake, Shane? Do you hear that? I said, yes. And so I continued to listen, and this thing got closer and closer. Then it stopped. And then I hear something basically stomping around in the woods. I hear like a percussive sound, like a knock on a tree. And I was like, holy moly, what is this? And then, after probably about 10 minutes of this going on, maybe a little less, we hear that rock clanking, or that's what it sounded like, get further and further away. It's leaving. And my buddy and I, Mitch, that was there, the seasoned camper from Oregon, we just kind of chatted for saying, hey, what's leaving sort of thing. And that was it. We wake up next morning. My buddy from Boston, he didn't hear anything. He was out snoring. He was out. He thought we were pulling one over him. And so we just kind of, in the back of my head, I thought, well, that was really interesting. But we were trying to rationalize it. Could have been elk. It could have been some sort of antlers. Could have been this. Could have been that. But I kind of passed it off and thought, wow, very interesting. It was a really quiet night that night, crystal clear night. And up in some of those areas of Mount Hood, you could hear a pin drop at night. It's so quiet. Well, we're on a fishing trip. So we head back out the next morning, make some breakfast, head back out, hike. Did not get lost because we knew our way now, and fished 2 or 3 other lakes, caught our Cory and fish, and head back to our camp. And did the same thing, built a big fire, cooked food, talked about our day, our plans for tomorrow. We were going to be out there for 3 to 4 days. This is the second day, and kind of made some plans for the following day. And we go to bed about 11:30 again. And once again, that 1:30, 2 o'clock hour, I start hearing that clacking sound, and it's getting closer and closer. It's coming from a distance. It's getting closer and closer. And my buddy, Mitch, is awake again. He goes, hey, it's back. And we're whispering in our tents. We're a few feet apart. And I said, wow, you're right. It is back. So I'm listening, and it gets closer and closer, and it stops. And we start hearing this movement in the woods again. And it does sound bipedal, but I can't really be sure. Didn't see it, but I can't be sure at that time. But it was massive. You could hear it. It sounded like this time was a lot more aggressive. It sounded like kind of like an elephant in the woods. And I couldn't tell if it was breaking branches off of trees or just stepping on them on the ground. My buddy Mitch is telling me he's hearing something off to his left. I'm telling him I'm hearing something off to my right. So I'm thinking there's 2 of something out there. And we're hearing that for a little bit, and then it gets really quiet. And then 5 in a row, 5 of the most powerful knocks or percussive sounds, like something hitting a tree. It sounded like a baseball bat, and came from this little hill that we were camped below. And it was so powerful, you could feel it in your tent. It would literally vibrate the bottom of the your tent. You could feel it. So powerful, and it would echo probably for miles. One of the reasons you feel it up there is the ground's got a lot of roots in there. So it's kind of a hollow thing. When you're coming down the trail up there, you can hear people or animals coming down the trail, but this was truly powerful knocks. And so we heard that. Everybody's awake now. Everybody's whispering back in their tents. My buddy Ian's going, "What is that?" He's kind of freaking out. And then silence, it stops. And then up above us, we hear, and I definitely heard this, something come through the trees up high. And it was coming from a distance, but it was hitting branches on the way down. And I hear this thud next to my buddy Mitch's tent. And he was next to the lake, and there was a little bit of mud there. And I instantly knew what it was. I knew a rock had come in. I knew it was a rock. You could hear it coming through the trees. And when it hit that thud, I knew something was tossed at our campsite. And my buddy Mitch was like, "You know what that was?" And I said, "That's a rock." And so we're whispering. And of course, Ian, my buddy from Boston, he's freaking out. He's absolutely freaking out. And I did something stupid. I previously, because he was so afraid of bears, I actually loaned him a weapon, just a 9mm, not the perfect woods gun per se, but I thought it would calm him down, quit banging pots and stuff, which was a mistake because he was freaking out based on all the stuff going on. And I thought for sure he was going to come out and start shooting. He wasn't really familiar with guns. Like I said, stupid on my part, but it happened. And I decided that I needed to go over to his tent and calm him down and take that gun away. I didn't know what he was going to do. So I unzipped my tent. And mind you, this is like 2:00 in the morning. Ian, every night, the 2 nights we were there, he would build up this tremendous bonfire because he wanted to keep the animals away. And we would tell him, "Man, it doesn't need to be so big." But he built this huge bonfire. I mean, just every branch he could put in that fire, he built up. So it was still burning fairly good at 2:00 in the morning. And I'm getting out of my tent. I'm unzipping it. And I'm looking around because I really didn't want to get out of my tent. But I was fearful of what Ian may do. And I'm looking around. And I'm just scouring the area. I'm about to get out. And then I notice movement behind this tree at basically my 1:00. And behind this tree, I see something swaying. And as I key in on it, I can see a head, a shoulder, and I can see a hand on the front of this giant pine tree. And this thing's just swaying back and forth. And it looks massive. And I just sat there and watched it for a second. And I didn't really get a whole lot of detail, which is, the typical story. But it was just one of those things where I knew what I was looking at. It was, just massive and swaying. And I could see the hands. I could see its hands. I could see its shoulder. I could see its head. And it's just swaying back and forth. And within a couple of seconds, I don't know if it heard me unzip the tent zipper or if it saw me. It peeled away and went back up the trail and it was gone. And that was it. I never got out of my tent. Ian calmed down. Mitch calmed down. We didn't really say any other words that night. We were just I remember my heart being in my head. It was pounding. I was truly fearful. This thing came back 2 nights in a row. And so collectively, the next morning when daylight hit, as soon as it was daylight, 5:30, whatever, we collectively packed up and just got out of there. Really didn't talk about it till way after we got home, and we were just kind of talking about it. But yeah, that experience solidified the existence of Sasquatch. I had quite 2-night experience, and all I can, I spent many months thinking about this. Why 2 nights? That's such a rare thing. Why? And the only thing I can think of is that we got lost on that ridge line above our camp. That's where we originally got lost. We saw a lot of bear sign, but I think we disturbed something up there and a place that people don't go. We got off trail. We got lost. We were urinating, after drinking water and making noises and talking. I think we disturbed something. And then basically it just said, "Hey, time to leave." You entered this area. It's time to leave, and wanted us out of there. Though it seemed aggressive at the time, the rock never hit a tent and nothing came and smashed down our tents and whatnot. So it was more of a get out of town sort of thing. I regret not staying there 3 nights, but at that time I was unprepared for that sort of thing. So that's the gist of my encounter. Like I said, we with the Olymp project and some solo stuff had a lot of neat things happen over the years.
Wow, that would have seeing that would have probably scared the crap out of me. That's very terrifying. Darcy, have you ever had any personal encounters or experiences that you would consider, profound, that you could say, "Hey, this is something, going on here"?
I actually have not. I haven't been out Sasquatch or Bigfoot hunting, so to speak, and I've never been a huge camper, but I trust the reports that are coming in because there's just such a vast amount of them across North America. And yeah, I mean, when there's trace evidence left behind at the scene of the crime, so to speak, that also points to the evidence that an encounter was real. So I'm just a researcher on the outside of the primary investigators, the people that get the firsthand evidence.
Well, let's get down to the big question for me. I want to start with you, Darcy. What do you believe that this creature is? Is it a hominid, a flesh and blood creature? Is it something metaphysical? Is it extraterrestrial? Based on your research, what do you think we're dealing with here?
Yeah, I would say flesh and blood. I kind of stay away from the portal jumping Sasquatch or Bigfoot theory. Although there's plenty of people that say that they've had experiences that involve something like that. I think it might be, in my opinion, a fringe theory that's kind of distracts from the science or the actual hardcore facts that are there that could present an animal that's just yet to be acknowledged by the mainstream scientific community. I think when you look at the long history internationally, going back thousands and thousands of years, not only in North America, I can say around 800 to 900 years ago, at least, because the Vikings had landed on the shores of North America pre Christopher Columbus, and they were able to, record in their history encounters with a wild man, something that was not the native indigenous peoples of North America, but something that was nocturnal and was robbing their fish nets at night, where their encampments were along the shores of North America. And then you go 3,000 years back, before BC, and you've got stories that come from the Shenanjia National Rainforest of China, where dynasties were warring in that area of China at that time, and one of the basically a emperor had been gifted a wild man by one of his soldiers at the time. This is all recorded in their history, and their wild man is called the Yeren, which the Yeren directly translates to wild man. And Yeren sightings have been happening in this area of the world for that long, and they've been told through oral and written tradition. These creatures resemble something like an ape-like 8-foot tall Bigfoot or Sasquatch type being. And, Jeff Meldrum, he collected evidence from the Yeren, and he presents on that in the documentary that I just did. And, when he was over there in China looking at the footprints that were cast by recent sightings in the 80s, the gentleman who saw his foot casts that came from North American specimens this gentleman was completely blown away because they without him actually doing his own research, this man was confronted with footprints that look exactly the same in terms of anatomy, having a mid-tarsal break, showing a pressure ridge in the track, depending on where the creature was walking. If it was flat and supple substrate, it would create a pressure ridge, which is a unique anatomy to these types of creatures. And so my working theory is that we have a unclassified upright ape living in North America. And the ape is singular, but this would be tribes of them living in scarce population numbers throughout North America. Because there's just been so many sightings in different forests, state parks, you name it, in Canada and the United States. And then in places internationally, people will notice in history there was a connection between a continental divide now, but the connection was the Bering Land Bridge or ice bridge between China, Russia area, and the United States, North America, Canada area, Alaska and such. And lots of different fauna had migrated across that. We know that the bear, which we would think originated in North America, it actually originated in Asia. This is where it truly came from. And through migration, it came to North America using this Bering land bridge. So it's very possible that if the creatures that we're seeing here resemble a creature that is seen in parts of Asia, Russia, Eastern Europe, even parts of the Middle East. We talk about an encounter or the tales of the Dev, which have been seen in Iraq, the mountains of Iraq in history. Well, it's very possible that there's a lineage that's connected. They may have evolved a little bit on their own, and there would be a just like humans, regional adaptations and how they changed or look a little bit. We look different from a Japanese person or from sub-Saharan person. So it's possible that these creatures exist in similar habitats, clinal rainforests, temperate rainforests throughout the world, in scarce populations, in deep wilderness. And sometimes we come across them, they come across us. It's a fleeting moment. And in the past, throughout history, it's been recorded, these moments, because people have talked about them, written about them, and as of late, taken video, film, and taken pictures of them.
Yeah, I want to get to that a little later. I'd like to get your thoughts, David, on would you agree that with Darcy, that this is some sort of hominid being?
Yes, absolutely. We're from the Olympic Project. It's a group of like-minded researchers that are looking to vet information as it comes, and we're definitely pursuing the physical. Now, that being said, I don't want to dismiss the other side of the fence. That's not correct either. It's just what we are pursuing as a group of researchers, which is the flesh and blood. It may have capabilities that we don't quite understand. And if you take the time to listen to the stories from the indigenous peoples, they have very definite viewpoints that something is very different about these creatures. But that nonetheless, we're tracking and finding foot impressions, we're finding hand impressions, we're finding, or I am recording very suspicious audio that we think we could maybe link back to it possibly being a Bigfoot. So for us, we're chasing the physical. It's let's find as much evidence as we can. I don't know if we're ever going to get the body, but we are definitely pursuing, what it's leaving behind, clues that definitely take a physical form to manifest. So, yeah, that's pretty much where the Olympic project is headed, which I'm part of that, and so that's what we like to do.
Very cool. And Shane, anything to add to that? Would you agree as well?
Absolutely. I mean, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, and acts like a duck, it's a duck. And this is something over the years, like David said, that it leaves hand impressions, that leaves foot impressions, that probably leaves scat laying around. We've come over some interesting scat over the years that quite likely makes nests periodically, that leaves hair behind. It's a physical entity, something very elusive, obviously, something very rare. It's definitely some sort of primate, hominin, something of that nature that is low in numbers. And a lot of people just can't wrap their heads around that. But you can look at recent discoveries like the Tapanuli orangutan that was discovered, that the natives in Sumatra talked about, that the Western, the Western science says, there's nothing to it. And then lo and behold, in 2017, the Tapanuli orangutan is proven to exist, and the natives have been talking about it for eons. Well, we got that same scenario here in North America, where and actually across the world, but specifically in North America here, we have individuals, First Nations people talking about the Sasquatch and making masks of the Sasquatch and have names for certain areas of the Sasquatch. I think it's time we listen to them a lot more. And it's not lore. This is something that's a physical entity that lives in the woods, that breeds, it survives. To what, how well, I have no idea, but it's definitely a physical entity, and its capabilities, I think, for us that don't live in the woods are mind blowing. You're talking about the ninja of the woods, something that avoids mankind, and I think that's a key to their survival.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to get to, is how they do avoid mankind, how we were never able to really get any good pictures of them. They're mostly heard and never seen. I'd like to get from each of you, I guess, what you would consider some of the most profound evidence, physical evidence, like a footprint or any kind of samples that have found. Just for you, what would be the most profound, just a couple of examples. We'll start with Darcy.
Profound examples of
Physical evidence. Yeah.
Physical evidence. Well, I guess one of the really incredible cases that was covered in my first documentary was the Bosberg Cripplefoot. This was documented and analyzed really well by a former doctor of anatomy and anthropology out of Washington State University named Grover Kranz. Grover Kranz taught at Washington State for, he had his tenure and such there. And he took this subject very seriously once he saw the tracks left by the Bosberg Cripplefoot. And what's very interesting about that track or that incident, it happened and some police officers were called to the scene. They followed the tracks into the forest, and one track was quite normal what one of the foot impressions in the mud and the grass and so on and so forth was a remarkably large foot track. So, would meet the description of what we would call a Bigfoot. This was anywhere between 17 to 16 inches long, about 6 inches wide, I believe, or a bit bigger. And the other foot impression looked very contorted, meaning the toes were splayed out in a very strange way. The toes were not aligned like the other foot impression. They seemed to be pushed apart, and it almost looked like there was a toe missing. But what this anatomist and anthropologist did was he took one of the foot casts and he looked for signs of a working foot. He looked for signs of anatomy working in motion. And you could see that it's possible this foot was badly crippled because of what they theorized a spine neuropathy, a lesion on the spine that it even happens in humans, although our foot would be a lot smaller if it were to be cast. But it's where the muscle starts to pull and contort in a strange way because the spine is damaged. And so this creature had been walking on a really poorly laid out foot due to this crippling disability that it apparently had. And through the research that Grover Kranz did, it just kind of pointed to something that's real, that's living. It laid many tracks, and they cast many of them and followed them into the forest after the sighting was reported. And I guess when you see somebody that is so academically sound in their logic and understands what they're looking at, it really convinced me that this was a very credible incident. And it's not spoken about as much as, say, the Patterson-Gimlin film, but it's a unique case, I'd say.
Now, while you're mentioning the Patterson-Gimlin film, for those that aren't familiar, could you give just a brief description and overview of what that was?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of break that down in the documentary. We slow it down frame by frame and zoom in. And the tale is that Bob Gimlin over here on my left and Roger Patterson, they were friends. They took an interest in sightings that were happening in the late 60s out near in Northern California. In what's the creek called, guys?
Bluff Creek.
Bluff Creek. This is a native reserve area in Northern California. And when they decided to set out on a trip on horseback to follow the creek and go on trails, Roger Patterson had a 8mm camera in hand. He was hoping to record this elusive creature because there had been so many sightings in that area. And one day they were coming around a bend, and their horses actually saw the creature first. They noticed it and they reared up. They were a little bit startled when they came around this bend. And this thing apparently, due to Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson's accounts of the incident, this creature knew the gig was up. It was squatted down apparently by the creek near the water, probably taking a sip, and it stood up and started walking away quite quickly across the dry creek bed that's surrounded by forest in this area. And Roger Patterson quickly jumped off his horse and took chase after it. He was, it was an old hand wound camera, so he was recording this on foot and running and stopping. And that's how we got that very famous, just over a minute clip of Patty. We call her Patty, and it's a she by what we can tell, because it was, it had features of anatomy that we see in females, which it had breasts, big sort of curvaceous breasts. And people theorize that she may have possibly given birth recently if they were quite voluptuous like this. And she walked away quickly, disappeared in the forest. And I think an interesting theory that's kind of connected with this, Shane Corson can actually continue a bit on with this story, because there were other researchers or other witnesses in this area that found tracks, and they found, apparently it's been recorded that an individual had found what looked like a nesting site near where the Roger Patterson film was shot. And one of the incredible things that the Olympic Project has been doing is they've been investigating a supposed nesting site, or could be a Sasquatch or Bigfoot nesting site that they've found in the Olympic National Forest of Washington. So if we believe that Patty was had given birth nearby at this time, possibly, and there was a nesting site found also in this area, it kind of points to a theory that these creatures, have young and raise their young and live in small sort of tribes and communities in the wilderness.
That's very, very interesting. Now, David, I know you have obtained some audio clips, very interesting audio clips of what could possibly be these beings. Is there any other evidence that you have come across that's particularly interesting to you? Because I do want to play these clips here
Sure.
while we're talking about this. But
Sure, I can just maybe wrap up the Patterson Gimlin film, because
Sure.
it is probably my number one go-to piece of evidence. Not just the film, but the picking apart of what the evidence shows. And you really, for your audience, if they really want to know more about the film from an expert point of view, look up Bill Munns. He is a costume designer out of Hollywood that took on the challenge of he was going to prove that Patty was a suit. And the more he got into it, the more he realized, and the evidence that he could glean from the film was that there was muscle movement that could not be replicated by a suit. No way, no shape, no how, no form. He also studied the footprints, the physical evidence of the footprints that were left on that sandbar. And Dr. Jeff Meldrum has a research paper on the foot morphology, that shows that it is not a human foot. The way that the foot works is not on par with the way our human foot works. So just to kind of wrap this up, that there is more evidence if you want to dig into it and learn more from it. It is not what people say, a man in a suit. There's just too many things that can be refuted from that aspect. So the evidence is there, but it's still not the body. So it's back to that.
Right. Well, Shane, anything to add to that particular question before I play some of these audio clips?
Yeah, obviously the Patterson-Gimlin film, hands down, never been disproven. Bob is a good friend of ours of the Olymp projects, and speaking with that man, look in his eyes and you see truth. That aside, David covered that really well. Definitely check out Bill Munn's work, and of course, Dr. Jeff Meldrum's work on that. And you have all these impressions casted over the years, Cripplefoot, as Darcy mentioned, but from around the United States, around British Columbia and Canada, that are just amazing. And we have hair samples. We have a lot, you mentioned earlier about the video. There actually is a lot of interesting video out there, a lot of interesting photos out there. Usually they just get passed off and dismissed because it's a fleeting glimpse, which is typical. It's typical. The vast majority of sightings are roadside crossings where people are expecting, and it's just a fleeting glimpse. So something that wants to be elusive, that's what I expect. Who's 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, most people aren't walking around filming. Even if they do, your movements blur everything. So you're going to get a lot of blurry photos. But I'll tell you this, the Olymp Project and many other individuals and groups out there have some really interesting thermal footage, video footage, pictures. It's out there. People actually want to do their homework and research it. I look at one of my favorite thermal pieces of evidence is the Sarah and Jonathan Brown down in southern Washington, that they borrowed one of our FLIRs because they were having this activity on their property, and they filmed, they FLIRed a Sasquatch, no doubt in my mind. Jonathan and his brother filmed on an Indian reservation, filmed a Sasquatch. There is a lot of stuff out there, but people just don't, and I'm very skeptical about a lot of stuff. But as David was talking about with Bill Munn's, the deeper you dive into this rabbit hole and you really start to look at the loads of evidence that's out there, that's compiled, that's been collected over the years, that many academic individuals and laymen have accumulated over the years, it's really compelling. And it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. So there is that sort of element out there. And of course, real quick, we're talking about NEST. Yeah, the NEST study site that that we're working on, the Olymp Project, is absolutely fascinating. And Darcy touched upon the Patty thing. In 1967, there was an individual, Lyle Laverty, that was working for a timber company, and he came across a nest in 1967 in Scorpion Creek, above Scorpion Creek, which feeds into the Bluff Creek area. So, the same area that Patty was filmed. So there is this connection there, possibly with nests and birthing scenarios. So it's just one of those things that's very interesting. There is a lot of evidence out there. I think we're working on some huge things with these nests that we're coming across that were led to us. And just this year, back in February, found a brand new one in the making and caught the maker without seeing it, but caught the maker making it. It's patterns of predictability doing this work. So yeah, there's loads of evidence out there. I think people need to look at it, and academia needs to look at it a little more seriously.
Yeah, now speaking of evidence, I want to play some of these sound clips here. Now, I have them in order that they were sent. I think first we have what's called Loud Whoop. 5 times. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have this on a loop. I'm gonna play it. You won't be able to hear it, but the audience will. As I play this, if you could give just a little commentary on maybe what we're hearing right now. So
Chris?
I'm gonna go ahead. Yeah.
I have numbered the clips 1 through 5.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want to go in a progression or if you want to
Well,
start
I
with.
actually, let's see. I have number. Yeah, we can start with actually number 1 here, which is the
Okay.
howl.
Yeah, if I
Okay.
can have a couple of
Yeah.
seconds to
Of
set it up.
course.
It
Sure.
is okay. So it is a vocalization that I recorded, and it is also comparing another vocalization that another researcher recorded in Ohio. So I recorded my recording in Washington State, and it's looped. So you'll hear one howl, and then you'll hear another howl. The first one is the one I recorded. The second one is the one that Charlie Page of the BFRO recorded, and I think that they sound very similar.
Okay, let me go ahead and play this, and I'm going to loop it a couple times so everybody can hear. Stand by. Okay, very interesting. Now that was the one that just sounded like a few whoops. I think I had the wrong one playing there. Let's see. The howl here. Okay, there we go. Here it is. Sounds kind of like a siren, right?
Okay, did you play number 1 or did you play another one?
I believe this is the loud whoop, which is number 5.
Oh, okay, yeah, that wasn't the setup. Okay, the loud whoop is just a typical sound that a lot of people hear in the woods. If you're not familiar with it, you might not associate it with a Bigfoot sound. But those in the know, this is a sound that's commonly associated with the Bigfoot.
Okay, now I'm gonna play the one that says roar 5 times at number 4.
Okay, number 4 is just it's just a real loud guttural sound. That's not a dog. It's not a coyote. It's and you may ask, well, how do you know that? Well, I actually analyze these sounds via a visual format through a spectrogram or a spectrograph. So I am looking at this, and it's akin to looking at a fingerprint. And each animal has their own individual characteristics. So it doesn't match the characteristics of a wolf, it doesn't match the characteristics of a dog, or it doesn't match the characteristics of a coyote. So that kind of leaves us, well, what is it then? I don't know, but I know it's not one of those things that I just rattled off.
Right. Well, let's play that. Let's see what this sounds like. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's very interesting. Like no animal I've heard before. Wow. Okay. Let us go to the Rainier howl.
Okay, that was a audio that was sent to me that was recorded in an area of interest that we've worked before. So I was interested in it, and it's a typical long vocalization that people associate with Bigfoot vocals. I think you'll understand when you hear it.
Okay, let's play this one. Oh, yeah. Very interesting. Okay, and let's see what else we got. We have I played the loud whoop first, but I'm gonna play that again since it was the wrong one. Let me go ahead and play the loud whoop for you guys again. Let's see. And then we have a couple more here. We have the one of your faves, which is number 3, which is another howl here.
Yeah, it's also has a wood knock in it. So it's like something was yelling and then something responded with a wood knock, which is a percussive sound that is associated with Bigfoot activity. We're not quite sure how they do it. Sometimes it sounds like wood on wood hitting a tree. Sometimes it sounds like, like a mouth pop or a mouth click. Sometimes it sounds like, I call it a power strike, and it's just this thunderous booming sound. We're not quite sure how that's made. Sometimes they're rock clacks, but they're very much in tune with using percussive sounds. And what I liked about this clip is it has a nice long scream and then a wood knock in the middle of the scream.
Cool. All right, let's play this one. One here. There we go. Wow. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go through and play these all one more time so the audience can hear each one separately again.
I have somebody at the door. I'm going to have to...
Sure.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, I'm just going through and playing these over again. These are different possible Bigfoot sounds. Very interesting sounding. Some of them almost sound like human-like yelling.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to hear it from a distance. I'll play a couple of more of these for the audience here, and then we'll move on. This one almost sounds like some kind of dog barking or something. And there's the whoop. All right, very interesting. Now, let's move on to what you guys think about modern academia's view on the whole Bigfoot. Why do you think they shy away from it so much and it's, never even mentioned? It's only brought up by independent researchers like yourself. What are your thoughts, Darcy, on modern academia's views on Bigfoots?
I think, modern academia is taking it seriously because you have people like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who works in modern academia. He's a professor out of Idaho State University in Pocatello, Idaho. And he has the largest collection of tracks casted from sightings across North America and internationally. So I think in terms of a acknowledgement, if that's what you mean, from mainstream media saying that this creature does exist, and it's not just scientists like Dr. Meldrum that are kind of on their own championing this idea. I think the mainstream really follows academia and what is acknowledged in the fossil record as well as the historical record. And in the fossil record, we can say Homo sapiens have been around for at least 250,000 years. At the same time that we've been around, 200,000 years ago, there was Gigantopithecus, which really closely resembles its fossil remains show a skull that would have been very remarkably similar to what people describe as very large Sasquatch sightings, something like Patty with a cone-shaped head and a big sort of gorilla-type face, but larger. And so if we just draw the comparison in timeline of when these two hominids existed, us, Homo sapiens, and those, Gigantopithecus, which is 200,000 years old for them, 250,000 years old for us, that means we coexisted at one time. So if that's acknowledged that we coexisted at some time in the past, and we have evidence of, all kinds of sightings that have happened throughout the past and still now of something that closer resembles. I'm not saying that it is a Gigantopithecus or an Australopithecus or, I don't know if it is exactly that, but of all the things people can make up that they see, and the way that the similarities in the descriptions of the accounts that have come in over time, it just seems to compound and point to the similarities of what we have in the fossil record. So what I'm saying is mainstream scientists other than Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum have to maybe catch up with the idea that some of these relic hominids still exist in deep wilderness. And I can't say for sure why they will not acknowledge it, other than, it's not something that is of interest to them. That could be the greatest reason of all, is just that it doesn't touch everybody's lives, so it's not that important. COVID-19, for example, is apparently more important.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the fact that the kind of woo-woo aspect of, extraterrestrial or interdimensional, when you add that in, modern academia doesn't want to, touch anything that they can't explain, and I don't think they can explain everything that's going on with Bigfoot. What are your thoughts on that, David? Why do you think mainstream academia avoids the whole Bigfoot studies?
Money, 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 money. It's all
Sounds
about the
right.
money.
Yeah.
Yep. Bigfoot is not going to bring money to the higher institutions. So it is, it's a fringe thing. Yeah, we've got enough evidence. We believe that science should take a good, long, serious look at it. But where's the money coming from? Who's going to fund that? Who's going to give, the grants that it takes to run a university? And now everybody's being crunched. So I don't see it really changing too much in the future on a real serious aspect. We maybe get more Dr. Meldrums coming down the pike, I think, as the younger generation comes through, and maybe a little bit more open-minded. But it's, again, who's going to be bringing in the dough? So it's not somebody following Bigfoot.
That sounds about right. What are your thoughts on that, Shane?
Yeah, David nailed it there. Here's the thing, real quick before I get into that. Here's the thing, when you talk about fossils and the fossil record, basically it's estimated that the sampled taxonomic diversity in the primate fossil record is only about 8% of what actually existed in the past. For argument's sake, say they've discovered 20% of the taxonomic diversity in the primate fossil record. That's so small. There is so much room to discover all sorts of different primates that used to live and thrive. Dr. Meldrum described this to me really well one time. He said, think of a stream that has, or upside down tree. And that's your fossil record, where it diverges in multiple directions. But to find a fossil now, just to find a fossil is miraculous. It's amazing. It takes perfect situations for a fossil to be formed. So I always get a little bit, I guess, a little bit adamant with people when they say, "Oh, there's no fossil record for Sasquatch or primates even in North America." I said, "How many people are actually looking for them? How many people? I mean, it could be such a small sample; it's just not been discovered." Now, to get back to your original question, I actually there's been a lot of science involved in this with not just Dr. Jeff Meldrum, but Grover Krantz and the late great John Bindernagel and John Mainzinski, a lot of great scientists involved in the subject matter. What I'm seeing nowadays is, yes, like David said, it is money, 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 because when you work for a university or a lab, you need grants and permission and you don't want ridicule for a lot of things. So that makes a lot of sense. But I'll tell you, I work with, and David's involved with this as well, a group called Project Zoo Book, where we work directly and talk with, I mean, they're mainly talks of discussion with individuals from around North America that are of academic value, that come to us and talk with us, that are invited from all walks of life, whether it's biology or anthropology or etymology, all walks of science. We've been talking with these individuals. There's a lot of individuals that are hiding in the closet because they have to, because of their careers. But there's a lot of academic individuals that are seriously interested in this subject matter that would blow your mind. And like David said, this younger generation that's coming up that is getting listening to podcasts such as this, reading books, watching YouTube videos on this subject matter, that are heavily interested in this subject matter. And some of them have had their own encounters, but they can't come out of that closet yet. We're about to breach something here in the next couple of years, I believe, that it'll be amazing with academia and their involvement. I think we're kind of turning that curve, turning that point.
Yeah, we are entering fascinating times when it comes to discoveries and things that people are coming around to realizing. To finish up tonight, I'd like you to get each of you to tell me a little bit about the Olympic project, and also just tell us basically what would be the most exciting thing that you're working on. You mentioned the nests earlier, which is very fascinating to me, that you're finding these nests around that could possibly be being used by these beings. So tell us a bit about the Olympic project and, maybe about what the most exciting part of that is for you guys right now. We'll start with Darcy.
Oh, well, I'm a filmmaker and I'm still pursuing this subject in the future. I finished this documentary recently, but I'm actually not fully involved in what's going on right now with the Olympic project. I have some documentaries that I'm working on that are completely divergent in theory from cryptids. I'm doing a UFO documentary about sightings around volcanic regions throughout Latin America. And that has Stephen Bassett, who's a political advocate for disclosure on Capitol Hill from the government. And I also have Jaime Maussan, who's a Latin American news journalist who's been in the business for over 40 years, reporting, believe it or not, on UFOs and related subject. So that documentary should be coming out in January. It's called Volcanic UFO Mysteries. And then I have another sort of crop circle documentary that's coming out called Crop Circle Realities. That also has Jaime Maussan, Stephen Bassett, and features some of Jaime Maussan's archival footage with Gary King, who's a pretty famous crop circle researcher over in the UK. Other than that, I just re-released director's cuts of The Unwanted Sasquatch. People, if they want to sort of scratch the surface on credibility around this subject and some notable history that's happened, leaving lots of trace evidence and such, and lots of witnesses. Check out The Unwanted Sasquatch on Amazon Prime. It's free to watch. And I also released a underground-based documentary called The Underground, re-released with theories on Phil Schneider and some of his accounts, some of his whistleblowing, so to speak. And it has some sort of titans in UFOlogy like Richard Dolan and Richard Sauder, who investigated deep underground military base history in his books. Thanks for having me on, and I'll pass it back to these guys to talk about what they're doing with the Olympic project.
Yeah, very cool. And I'd love to have you back on to talk about some of those other books and things that you're working on. That's all right up my alley. That's all this show. So thank you again for coming on. I'd love to have you back on to talk about that. All right, David. Sure. So tell us a little bit about the Olympic project and anything else you have working on before you head out.
Okay, Shane, I'm going to leave the nest up to you to describe. I'll just briefly hit about the Olympic project. We're just a like-minded group of researchers that put science first at the head of the game. We assume every bit of information that comes to us, whether it is scat, hair samples, foot impressions, where it was located. We do in-depth investigative work. We don't just take anything as somebody just hands something to us. We really dive deep and try to make sure that we know what we're looking at. We have lots of different resources, lots of different folks that work with the Olympic project that can help us out. Cindy Dosen, she has Hominidea Enigma, which is she has the ability to look at a hair and determine where did that hair come from. Is it human? Is it a raccoon? Is it deer? Is it bear? Is it elk? What is it? She has also a group of hairs that follow a unknown, but they are all have a similar characteristic. So we just have a whole lot of different folks within the group that we really do vet the information. We assume that it has a natural source, not an unknown source. So if we get a footprint, for instance, a foot casting, we have to look at bear first, because bear is the most common mistaken identity out there. Once we disprove that it isn't a bear, then we're back into the suspicious camp. So that's what I like about the Olympic project. We're a scientific based minded. We aren't scientists, all of us. Some of us are, some of us aren't, but we collect information that can be vetted by science if they so choose to look at it.
Very cool.
That's Shane, close it out.
Yeah, go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, the most exciting thing I worked on ever, I'll be honest with you, ever, is these nests that were brought to our attention by a timber cruiser back in 2016. And having found now to date, as the Olympic Project member and members, we found 22 of these things, 23, just a brand new one this year. 22 ground nests that look like giant bird's nests in the middle of nowhere that defy logic. Having worked with Dr. Meldrum and brought him out and brought anthropologists out to this area and primatologists and talked with bear biologists and bringing zoologists out to this area, they're all completely just left in awe. I mean, what do you say when you find something of this nature in these areas? It's absolutely amazing. This is a whole nother show by itself. We only touch upon this, but I'll tell you, the most exciting thing that we've been working on since 2016 are these nests. They've given us unknown hair that lacks a medulla and kind of matches other unknown hair from around North America, especially like primate hair. So that's one aspect. Then we have these hand impressions, and we have these foot cast impressions. We have this structure of these nests, how they're built, how they're formulated. They're not just put together haphazardly, as Dr. Meldrum will tell you. They're formulated. It takes intelligence, it takes strength, it takes time. Yeah, so it's just the most amazing thing I've been working on. And I know within the Olymp project, we've been working over years. And a lot of the audio that David's collected, that I've collected and David's analyzed and visually looked at, has come from these areas. So we're painting a huge picture here. We have ground nests, we have hair, we have impressions that have been casted. It's something that is just phenomenal to me. And what we're really doing over these last 4 years is patterns of predictability. Where do we expect these nests to be made? When do we expect them to be made? Like the month of February, for example. How, when, why, and all those questions. I hope science steps up to the plate here, because I think as a whole, science is kind of sitting on their hands. And but I would love for some academic individual that could spend the time, and we do work with a lot of those individuals, but this should be a bigger story as far as I'm concerned. This should be something huge. This is really amazing stuff. And yet it doesn't seem to pique the interest of academia as a whole. It should. Prove me wrong. I'll tell you what, challenge, prove me wrong. Tell me what's doing this, because I'll tell you what's not. So yeah, having said that, thanks for having me on, and look forward to maybe future endeavors.
Definitely, yes. Thank all of you for coming on. Before you all head out, give us any kind of, if people are interested in finding out more about any of your work, websites, social media, anything you want to plug before you go. We'll start with Darcy.
Sure. You can check out all my films on Amazon Prime, iTunes. Some of them are on tubetv.com. Earlier series called Beyond the Spectrum. And if you just want to check out my studio page, which I still need to dearly update, it's www.occultjourneys.com. I'm on Facebook by the same name, Instagram by the same name. Reach out to me if you have any interesting information to share, if you ever want to collaborate on something. Thanks for having me on again.
Very good. David, any websites or anything to give out?
Sure. We can be reached at olympicproject.com. And specifically for me, if you have an audio recording that you would like for me to take a look at, go ahead and go to the webpage. There is contact information. I'm David Ellis. So just go ahead and contact me, and I'll reach out to you via email, and we can get the work on your audio, whatever it is that you record.
Cool. And Shane?
Yeah, basically contact through olympproject.com. I'm on Facebook under Shane Corson, also on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow me there or jump on there. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have something of significance. But yeah, definitely go through the olympproject.com. And I would also say this, it was a pleasure working with Darcy Weir and being involved in his documentary. I've enjoyed it. I've watched it. I thought he did a fantastic job. I'm looking forward to some of his future endeavors, whatever he does decide to take. And so just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on, and I'd love to have y'all on back in the future for some future talks.
For sure.
All right. You guys have an excellent night.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. Good night, Chris.